Friends, we are here with Claude Burns, a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, as well as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, an entrepreneur and the Inc. 500 CEO of Office Libations. Claude, did I miss anything in your biography there?
I think that was plenty. Thanks for the intro.
So I'm very excited to talk with Claude here because Office Libations is in the food beverage industry and very much at the front lines of the COVID-19 situation that's been developing and is now underway for several weeks here in the United States. So Claude is better positioned than almost anyone I can imagine to talk about what it looks like on the front lines. So Claude, what are you seeing?
Well, we've sort of been seeing impact for the past couple weeks, even before sort of California went to a shelter in place. Our business is based on serving offices, which is typically where large numbers of people gather. So most of the Bay Area offices, our clients shut down sort of over a rolling period in the beginning of March. But roughly in a 7-day period, we went from, one of the top growing companies in the country to having 0% of our revenue. So pretty massive impact for us just with the closures of businesses and people not gathering anymore.
Are there any offices at all that are open, such as offices and essential services that are using Office Libations, or are you just completely flatlined?
Yeah, most of our clients are in sort of tech and professional services. So a lot of them can sort of do their roles and jobs from home. So we don't actually have any offices that are sort of still functioning or sort of a complete wipeout for us. But we're trying some things, and I'm sure we'll get in that in a bit.
Right. Now, when you all of a sudden saw this massive kind of drop, I understand you also had to go through some pretty tough decisions in terms of laying off some of your employees.
Yeah, it's probably one of the toughest things I had to do. Most of the times when companies go through layoffs, it's always performance related. That business unit wasn't performing as well as it should have. It wasn't making enough money. There were better opportunities. But for my team, we were doing everything that I wanted to see, and having to sort of let the team go so we could survive whenever we sort of come out of this. The remaining, I kept 4 team members from a team of 25, and they're all on reduced hours and reduced salaries to hope that, whenever this passes, we're able to sort of pick back up and, get back to quote unquote normal. But probably one of the toughest things I've had to do.
So this has definitely been pretty dark so far, but let's shift. We can maybe get some optimism. Do you think that many of these companies that you've talked to who have had to kind of move things home, do you think they're going to be eager to resume and their orders with Office Libations once things start back up?
That's my hope. I expect that. I don't want to say things will go back to normal because I don't know if we know what normal looks like. But I think ultimately people are social creatures, and being around other smart people and bouncing ideas off of them is always going to be valuable. It's sort of those random interactions, and that sort of happens when people gather. So I don't see, offices completely disappearing. I see people wanting to be around other people, especially when you've been quarantined for 3 or 4 weeks. Even introverts want to see people. And while it's great to connect over Zoom or different technologies, I think that sort of face-to-face, that body language, so much of what we say is in nonverbal communication. It's really hard to do that, I think, over sort of technologies and sort of kind of put your head together to do it. So I think things will resume, and things will, for us, we'll definitely see an increase in business from zero. So we're looking forward to that. But in the meantime, we sort of have to fight through it and do what we can to sort of keep the business running.
Perhaps an irrelevant tangent, but do you expect that weeks of being forced into Zoom meetings with people is going to cause Zoom to become much more prevalent if we get out of this? Or are people going to say, I hate doing teleconferencing in Zoom, and have a backlash against it?
I think some people that like using Zoom will want to use it more, and other people find that it's an effective tool. I think other people will be like, I really like talking to people in person, and I think they'll go back to doing that. I think we'll probably see some memes that, that Zoom meeting could have been an email, just like normal meetings. So I think there'll be a lot more people using the tool and instead of meetings, but at the same time, a lot more people deciding that some Zoom meetings could just be an email.
One thing I'm finding here in Seattle is some people have who have a bit more of a risk tolerance are open to a walk and talk where they would ordinarily get coffee or have a meeting, where you go to a park on a nice day and just spend like half an hour to an hour walking at whatever distance they feel comfortable with. And I hope that this actually supplants a lot of the sitting meetings from before. So there might actually be some positive change to come.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that, but definitely taken more walks with my wife and my dog than I think I've done in the past. So there is some positive things out of this. But I think hopefully people appreciate more and gain a little bit more perspective on how lucky we are to sort of live right now and versus 100 years ago, and the way that we're still able to connect with people. And um, I think hopefully perspective is what we gain from this sort of trial.
So, as a true entrepreneur, I was very impressed to hear that despite all the problems that you were having with Office Libations, actually launched a new startup in the past week to address some of the changes. Can you talk a bit about the new startup?
Yeah, so we've actually launched two.
New startup.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we were lucky. We didn't have to go through what a lot of companies are doing and trying to figure out what is the impact on our business going to be. Are we going to lose 20%? Are we going to lose 30%? We lost everything, so it was very easy to decide, hey, let's just go ahead and relaunch something new. So the first one is sort of a pivot off our original business serving corporate clients. So as a lot of employees are at home, corporations want to make sure that they know that they're thinking of their employees. So we created sort of a snack box that they can get, that employers can ship to their employees. We include sort of a Zoom link that we randomly assign to different boxes to sort of help those companies and recreate some of those random encounters in offices. Instead of all of the marketing team just talking to the marketing team over Zoom meetings, that Zoom meeting may have an engineer thrown in or maybe an intern, and we can really sort of build some of that culture that companies have and less silo within it. And it also gives the leadership an opportunity to sort of send a custom note to their team, letting them know they're thinking about them or anything else that they want to communicate. So that was sort of one sort of office snack boxes. We spun that website up, but most of our clients are sort of contacting us directly, and we're sort of working outside of a true e-commerce platform. But then we also spun up Snacks for Doctors. And so that's sort of our way to sort of give back to the frontline medical personnel. We're taking sort of donations from different individuals throughout the country who can also nominate a hospital or medical center. And once we get enough for a full box, which is 150 snacks, we ship it to one of those facilities. So a way for people who are sort of sitting at home and don't know how they can help, to sort of help frontline staff, provide them with some food and some snacks. And for us, it's a way to keep our team working and keep our team employed while we do it. So sort of a win-win-win across the business and across our frontline medical personnel.
That's great. And what are the websites for those two services that you mentioned?
Yeah, the first one for the corporate clients are officesnackboxes.com, and then the second one is snacksfordoctors.com, either FOR or the number 4. Both of them go to the same place.
Great. And are there any stats or numbers that you can share about either of these initiatives, which are both really smart ideas?
Both are showing some traction. I would say for entrepreneurs out there, people that are looking for opportunities and are sort of saying like, I don't necessarily have the skills to be able to do something like that, or I don't have the funding or the money. We were able to launch Snacks for Doctors using freelancers on Upwork for under $150. I'm not a technical person whatsoever, but using sort of tools like Shopify and sites like that, we were able to spin the setup in less than a day and have it fully functional in literally under 24 hours and under $200. So I think there's always opportunity out there for people that want to sort of take a risk and sort of seize an opportunity. And we've more than we have a high multiple on that return already. So that's what I'll share for now. But we do also, with that program, donate meals to Feeding America. So every 10 snacks, we donate one meal. Like a lot of like a lot of us, sort of in the food industry, a lot of employees have been impacted. So I want to do what I can to also give back to people who are losing their jobs and sort of their livelihood in search of the greater good.
And you had mentioned when we were talking before we started recording here that you were actually inspired to do this idea based on your time in the military.
Yeah, one of the, I would say I wasn't inspired. My team came up with the idea. It's not me at all.
It's never the people
Yeah,
at us, is it?
it's not. It's definitely not me. The team came up with the idea as a way to like help their teammates out and sort of give back to the people fighting this pandemic. But it was very similar to care boxes or care packages that you would get in the military, and it's it's basically a snack box with a bunch of different stuff thrown in from people that you knew. And so while you were deployed, it was always nice to sort of get that package and just the acknowledgement that people still remember who you are while you're sort of forward deployed. And it's a very similar concept. And so when they told me about it, it was like, you know what, let's do it and let's see how fast we can do it. And we just did it.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. I've been saying to a lot of people to take notice to how people are reacting to this unprecedented situation, because there's a lot of people that are paralyzed and a lot of people are just stepping up and seeing opportunity. And I think the people who are stepping up are going to find incredible gains as they come through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, being an entrepreneur, I think you just have that natural, I want to do stuff. Like you're always doing something, even if it doesn't result in anything, you're sort of prone to, your default is action. And so for me, the idea of doing nothing, like I just couldn't do it. Like that's just not who I am as a person. So finding ways to sort of, proactively or productively channel sort of my energy makes me feel a lot better than not doing anything. And so finding ways to sort of support our frontline personnel and offices that are going through unprecedented challenges themselves. It's not like it's just us affected by this. It's everyone, and if people aren't affected yet, they're going to see it. I think somewhere down the line. And so doing our best to support who we can, our clients and customers, and now is what we're about as sort of entrepreneurs.
So feel free to be wrong about some of these things I'm going to ask you here. But let's start crowdsourcing some wisdom as to what we think is actually going to happen. So do you expect that the situation is going to start returning to normal for Office Libations and some of the companies that are going to start reconvening within the next 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 2 decades?
2 decades will be fine. People are very resilient. We adapt to change very, very quickly. It's painful, but there's tons of studies on like this amount of extra pay you forget about immediately, like living in a bigger house you forget about immediately. And so I think as a society, 2 decades will absolutely be fine. It will sort of be a history lesson. 2 years, maybe still be able to see some impact. But I think again, we're, overall pretty resilient. There's a lot of smart people that are working on challenges and problems. And I think 2 years, it may inform future policy decisions about how we deal with outbreaks like this and some of the actions that we take and how we take them. 2 months, hopefully we're back to normal, but I'm not quite so sure. I think we'll probably have a little bit of easing in some of the restrictions we have placed in places like California that are sheltering in place right now. But I don't know if we'll be completely back. 2 weeks, I don't see much much change than where we're currently at, except I think a lot of the rest of the country will probably have more sort of shelter in place and more restrictions there. I think some of the data that's come out of China and Europe is promising. But I think we in general have a lack of data and understanding of exactly where this problem is, how big it is, and what would happen. And I think a lot of really smart people are doing research and writing papers, and hopefully some of that data helps us decide what to do going forward. But as of right now, I don't think anybody knows. I think there's a couple of different guesses, but when you're trying to extrapolate data with a few data points, it can go any direction. So a lot of it is people's opinions are formed on what they want, and they find data to support it. And so there's just a lot of noise out there about what's going to happen. And I don't know is what I'll say. No idea. 10 years, we'll be fine.
All right. I'll set a serial reminder 10 years from now.
Yeah. Well, we may have another problem, but I think we'll be fine from this.
All right. Is this opinion somewhat matching what you've heard from anecdotal conversations with your clients or former clients? Or have you not talked with them about this? What are their general things they've been saying to you?
Yeah, I'm in a CEO group with CEOs from sort of different industries. Right now, most of our clients aren't seeing a lot of impact on their business. Most of our clients run sort of tech businesses or tech-enabled businesses or professional service firms. So a lot of the work that they're doing is the same. I think companies haven't really decided to sort of, cut all of the sort of tech pieces that you probably have in your business. A lot of them are sort of critical infrastructure. Some are, nice to haves, but you're not going to, eliminate your email software list because you think, unless you think things are really going to be bad, but they haven't seen that impact yet. For businesses that are like grocery stores, I mean, they're seeing massive amount of new demand, which is great for them. They're trying to hire like crazy, and hopefully some of the, we're working with distributors and other people to try to place some of our employees in those roles, at least for the time being, and then hopefully get them back. I think that a lot of people are not impacted yet will be impacted. A lot of people that are massively impacted now will see things improve. But overall, the economic damage that this sort of causes is going to create I think a massive issue. The dollar amounts are just too big, and I don't even think the federal government sort of has the resources to sort of recover an economy that's been shut down for several months. But we'll see. Yeah, but it's how you distribute it. Can you distribute it to the people that are most impacted? If you could do that, it would probably limit some of the impact. But unfortunately, I think our political system doesn't always function the most effectively. Yeah, shocker there. That was a hot take. But I think they're going to try to do some things that have probably never been done. And like I said, some economists will win a Nobel Prize for his research on this in the future. And we'll see what happens. But ultimately, there's always opportunity in the world. There's always smart people working on problems. But it's going to cause some pain in the meantime.
Are any of the opportunities that you have heard being discussed, any of the political, measures, countermeasures to this? Are any of the things that are currently being discussed something that you're following, is something that might be very helpful for you?
Yeah. So, like I don't know if I mentioned it during the recording or the pre-recording, but we sort of saw our business go to zero before a lot of the shelter-in-place orders were put in. So we were, a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of impact and in terms of like massive impact as well. So a lot of the programs that were put out, I'm sort of listening to the news, like, what's this going to do? So the SBA sort of disaster loan program. There's not a lot of guidance on what that means and how much it is. It's up to $2 million for businesses affected. And typically it's been like wildfires, floods, those type of things. But this is such a massive impact across a lot of different industries, and just, consumer spending 70% of the economy. And when you tell everyone to stay home, there's only so much stuff you can buy from Amazon. And when you're buying, from Amazon, it's like that small business that is sort of competing against Amazon is like doubly screwed. And how many of them actually are able to come out of it? Ultimately the SBA program's a loan. So you do have to repay it. And I think, the impact on sort of independent and small business is going to be massive, especially it's hard enough competing against Amazon. Now, how are you going to sort of do it when you have a bunch of debt that's added on, and a lot of people that aren't going out and maybe got used to ordering everything on Amazon. I don't know. I would say I'm probably more fearful of the economic impact than I am of the virus impact. But I don't get paid the big bucks to make those decisions. But I think it's going to be challenging. I think they pass sort of the checks to individuals sort of thing. Again, it's hard to spend that money if you can't go anywhere. So even though you may have that check, that's probably most likely going in people's savings, or to pay rent if they got laid off and don't have enough money. I would say my one suggestion would be sort of, unemployment is not enough for people who sort of lost their right to work. I think we need to find a better solution than go through unemployment and get unemployment checks. Sort of a unemployment plus, so to speak, for those workers a lot in the restaurant, hotel, travel industries that truly just lost it. To me, it's not a business cycle situation. It's you're sacrificing for the greater good, and because you're sacrificing, you should be rewarded for that sacrifice. Maybe not rewarded, but at least compensated. And I don't think I've seen anything that, in my opinion, would adequately compensate those individuals for the fact that they're giving up their livelihood to protect, the greater part of society.
Yeah, let's go back to the impossible questions. What do you think the GDP consequence will be if we do get back to work within, say, 2 months?
Yeah, I've been actually trying to find good data on this, and I don't think anyone has really put out any good analysis, at least that I've been able to find. But I could see easily a 10% hit. I could see easily a 20% hit. I think a lot of it depends on what the businesses that are remaining open and sort of have revenue, what they choose to do. Ultimately, restaurants, bars, travel, their demand is essentially zero right now. So it doesn't really matter what they do. It's, do the rest of the businesses that are staying open really cut back on spending? Do they sort of build that war chest? And that further sort of stops spending within the economy. And I think if that happens, you could see a 10-20% decline in a lot of the economy. If more people are, just a simple example, more people are buying groceries at home. Most people know that groceries are going to be cheaper than going out and eating, probably by a pretty big factor. That alone will sort of contract some of the GDP. And then if you assign that throughout industries, it's a pretty big number. I would guess 2 months, we probably see a 15 to 20% drop in GDP.
More impossible questions. What's the next quarter GDP look like? After things, say 2 months, we're somewhat back, let's say back at 60 to 80% staff. Was this just a blip, or is there permanent consequences?
I think it depends on your situation. If I'm guessing overall GDP, I mean, I see it going up. If it drops, say 15%, I think you're going to see probably it would have to be, I don't know, I can't do the math right now in my head, but it would probably get, a couple percent below what normal was before the impact. So pretty big jump. But I think for certain individuals, it's not going to matter. They're going to have spent through their savings, and they're not going to be able to sort of contribute to the economy and sort of continue spending. So a lot of the great things we've seen with wage growth, with low unemployment, all of those things are going to come screeching to a halt. And so I think overall the economy sort of grows much slower, but I think we'll immediately see sort of a big bounce back as people are excited to go back out and spend money and sort of support the local business and do a lot of the things that they miss doing. But what that growth looks like going forward, I think it's much slower. So I do think there's a long-term sort of hangover impact from it. 18 months, 2 years, if we get out of this in a couple months, I think we're sort of back on track as quote unquote normal.
To what extent are you spending all day following the news? To what extent are you tuning it out? And to what extent is there an overlap between you need to follow news for your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so originally, sort of before everybody was, sort of sheltered in place, I was following it pretty closely because I was trying to predict what was going to happen to our business. We had our first offices closed the first week of March, and it was like, okay, here's some, a little bit of like canaries in the coal mine. It's like, all right, well, are other people going to do this or not? And then it sort of started trickling down, and then I think Wednesday of the week before we had shelter in place, which was last Monday, um, we had probably half our clients call us to let us know that they were going to be closed. And that was sort of the, light bulbs are like, oh, we're kind of effed here. We need to think of something, and I need to figure out what we're going to do going forward. What's that impact on, our team, our employees? How much cash do we have? Like, can we, we have a line of credit, like we're going to pull it. And some of those like preliminary actions to try to, make us viable in the future. Now I don't really pay much attention. Most of, what I'm doing is sort of looking at what is, what are the things that we can control, that we can do to continue sort of operating the business. You can't help but see it if you're on, the internet. But for the most part, I've already, had enough of an impact. So for me, it's now action mode. What can we do to, in our control, to make things better and sort of come out ready to go. So that's sort of my take on it. But it's hard to avoid the news.
No, no doubt. I've been telling people that if you do have the capacity to filter out any or all of the news, which is, as you say, almost impossible, but to the extent you can do it, you have 20 extra hours a day on everyone else who's just glued to CNN, glued to the New York Times, and doing nothing but following it. So it could be a pretty big competitive advantage.
Yeah. For my downtime, I've been watching Tiger King, which is on Netflix, and it is crazy. The
Type.
only thing, yeah, Tiger King. The only thing crazier than this current pandemic is Tiger King. That shit is mind blowing. I'm serious. It's
Good.
wild.
I'll add that to the show notes along the two websites that you launched, as well as TV recommendations. I guess those. Are there anything else that
Uh,
you're?
yeah, I mean, one of the things I put out probably a week or so ago when I saw my schedule was going to be pretty open. If there's sort of any, entrepreneurs, business owners that, want someone to run some ideas off of, launch a new product, how to deal with different things, I'm happy to have a chat with people and see if it can sort of help in any way. One of my favorite things to do when I'm sort of not running my business is talk to other people about their business and just help them think about it from a different angle or be able to provide some value or a connection. So especially veteran entrepreneurs, being a vet myself, anything I can sort of help with that community, I love to do. So I would say the same thing sort of for your listeners, like, shoot me an email, shoot me a LinkedIn message. And be happy to, jump on a call or maybe even a Zoom meeting. I don't know, and see how things go.
As a fellow entrepreneur, I'm sure you're like me, where you have tons of ideas and you realize you just aren't in a place to execute because you're so busy on your current grind. So
Yeah.
far, are there ideas or opportunities that you've seen that you think some entrepreneurs should just pick up, free money on the table?
I mean, there's so many. To be honest with you, I don't think there's a shortage of opportunity in today's world. I think the idea part's easy. The idea part's fun. It's the execution part that's hard. And it's the execution part that is not fun. Coming up with the idea and doing it is great. It's like how to keep that idea alive and keep feeding it and keep providing it the right resources and attention. That's the hard part about, I think, being an entrepreneur. So I would say if I had to think about it, it's like what, take stock of who you are, what, resources you have, and see if there's a problem that you can apply it to. I'm sort of not in the same boat as a lot of people where it's like, oh, here's a problem, I'm going to go solve it. It's like, well, if you're not the right person to solve it, if it doesn't fit in your skill set, if it doesn't sort of fit in your passion area, that's a job. Like, that's a lot of work to sort of stay motivated and like convince yourself it's doable. But I definitely tell people sort of what is the thing that you care about, what are the things that you can actually solve, infrastructure in the United States is crumbling, but I don't have a construction background. Probably not the right person to solve that problem, even though there's probably a ton of opportunity in finding ways to help with critical infrastructure in the United States. So I don't think there's a lack of opportunity. I think it's really taking stake of, knowing yourself. It's sort of the Sun Tzu line. If you know yourself, you'll never lose a battle. So don't focus on the opportunity. Just figure out who you are and what resources you have and both your networks, and you find something that sort of strikes you. That's probably where you want to go.
Since you brought it up, are there veterans resources that you can recommend that will be helpful for veterans, or just general thoughts on the subject of veteran entrepreneurs?
Other veteran entrepreneurs. I think you have to talk to entrepreneurs to know what that journey is. Most entrepreneurs are going to be very open, very honest about what that journey is and what it feels like and how do you get started. It's easy to be like, oh, well, especially being in the Bay Area, it's like, well, we just had a $10 million investor and now we just, hire whoever we want. Most businesses don't get that start that way, and especially veteran-owned businesses. A lot of, us, and I have like a, really great network through Sloan, but don't have the network to access capital in that capacity. And so we have to use sort of what we got, which is a lot of the military is really good at that. So my biggest advice would be talk to veteran entrepreneurs. A lot of us have it on our LinkedIn profile, but you got to talk to somebody who's actually doing what you want to do. I think to get good advice, just generic sort of here's how you start a business. I mean, you can hopefully you can sort of access information online and get a lot of the fundamentals. But I think the actual this is how you do it, and this is how I did it. It comes from talking to people.
So in both, good or bad times, is there kind of systems, habits, advice that you have that you could give that would be just generally useful to people, be it, startup related or just kind of more generally life tips, life hacks that you found?
Don't quit.
Don't quit.
I mean, pretty much it. I think a lot of people fail fast. Well, if you're going to fail, yeah, it's better to fail fast. But to me, giving yourself the option to fail is not an option. As long as you have, your brain and perspiration and, or you want to do what you're doing, you have the chance to succeed. You only need to get lucky once, and sort of being an entrepreneur. And I think that comes from, persistence. And so if you don't quit, you're always in the fight and you always have a chance. Be smart enough to make a move when you need to make the move, but don't give yourself an out. I think if you give yourself an out, you're like, oh, it's okay. It's not okay, especially if you have employees. It is not okay. Those are people's, not exact life that you have in their hand, but it's their livelihood, and that's a big responsibility. And I think that if you're having employees and paying people to sort of execute on your vision, it's your job to do everything you can to take care of them. And sometimes that does mean, sacrificing some to save others, and so that you can come back. But don't quit would be my only piece of advice.
That is great advice. I don't know if you can top it, but if you do have any parting thoughts, questions, words,
I mean, I think a lot of people are scared and a lot of people are afraid with sort of what's going on now. And I think that, it's a reasonable reaction, but you always have to focus on what you can control. And a lot of it you can't control. I can't control what the government says. I can't control what sort of programs that they come out with. But I can control, some things. I can launch a website to be able to help our corporate clients. I can launch a website to help provide, snacks for medical professionals. I can do those things. And so to me, I just want to focus on what I can control and what I can do, instead of focusing on what I can't.
That's great. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, good catching up with you, man.
Anytime.